Hey, what's going on guys? Bertie here and welcome back to another Minecraft modding tutorial for version 1.18. In this tutorial we are going to be covering the BLIT method. So this is something I should have explained a little bit better earlier in the series when I covered these screens. However, I wanted to just cover it in a little more detail as I very lightly brushed over it. So, as you can see here, we're using the BLIT method to sort of state how it will draw it, essentially. So, first of all, it takes in a pose stack. Now, I haven't even explained what a pose stack is, so I'll try my best to explain it, but it's a little hard to explain. So, essentially, it's a matrix, and well, yeah, I mean, that's it. So it holds the rotation, the translation, and the scale. Does it hold anything else? Wait, let me check. So you have, for example, mole pose, which is what allows you to rotate it, basically. You just pass in a quaternion. So to get a quaternion, by the way, use a vector 3f. And then you can choose the different axis. So for example, xn would be counterclockwise on the x-axis, xp would be clockwise on the x-axis, yn would be counter on the y, yp would be normal on the y, and then you got zn, which is negative on the z, and zp, which is positive on the z. So for example, xp, and then you would do rotation degrees, or, of course, rotation, which is in radians, but rotation degrees, and then you could do 90 degrees, for example. Now, if you ever choose to modify the pose stack, you first of all must make sure you do it before you draw anything. So if I do it here, that's not going to do anything. What we actually need to do is do it before our BLIT. So it will rotate it, and then it will draw it with that rotation. However, there's two more things we need to do. We need first, before we ever modify the stack, we need to make sure we push the pose, and that will just basically create a new, I don't really know how to explain it, but a new slot in the stack of changes, I guess, is a good way. And then afterwards, after you've done your drawing, you need to do stack.push pose, and that pushes it out of the stack ready for the next changes to take place, essentially. I'm going to remove that though, because we don't need to do that. Let's now talk about these first two parameters here. So these are two integers, and these represent the x and y position that we are drawing our BLIT. So, okay, let me step back a little bit. Let's talk about what BLIT actually means. So, BLIT basically means to copy pixels from one place to another. So, in this example, we are trying to copy pixels across from our texture into the game, on the screen. And yeah, that's what BLIT means, basically. It's actually quite simple. So we are just specifying the X and Y position on the screen that it will actually draw. Now this left pos, this is where it gets a little confusing, because we're setting the left pos to 0. So you might think, why is it not drawing on the left side of the screen? And that is because basically Vanilla handles it. So Vanilla will set this left pos to something else based on the screen size. And it sets it to where sort of the left position of the screen is, essentially. And then we use the top pos, so that is the exact same concept. That is the top of where your GUI is drawn. And then we have these two integers here. And as you can see, we have these set to 0. So what are these integers, you may be wondering? Essentially, these integers represent the texture X and the texture Y, or the UV. So this is the starting point on your texture of where it will draw from. So, for example, let's say you had your GUI. Okay, let me open Paint. Just a simple Paint thing to try and show you. So, let's say this is your GUI. Right, so this is your GUI. You have all your fancy stuff in here. And yeah, this is the actual texture of your GUI. So, yeah. Let's put it up here. So, the texture of your GUI is like that, right? So let's assume that this was 256 in total, and this is the sort of actual part of your GUI. So for this, your texture is starting at 0, 0. The sort of first pixel of your texture that you want to draw is at the 0, 0 position. And so, as you can see, we pass in 0, 0. Now, let's assume you wanted to move that position to here, right? Now, the top left position, so the place that you want to start drawing it from, is now 18 by 16. So instead, you would put in here 18, 16. It's fairly simple. We then have these two integers right here. So this is the actual width and height of what you want to draw. So this may be a little deceiving because you might think this is the size of the texture. It's not the size of the texture. This is the width and height of what you actually want to draw. So for example, in here, you can see our width and height that we want to draw, because we want to draw this whole black box, is 460 by 450. So we would put 460, 450, or we would actually set that up here. As you can see, we set ours to 176 and 168. That's the size of what we want to draw. And yeah, now something I should mention about that is this Blit method that we're using right here is built assuming that your texture is the size 256 by 256. If your texture is not 256 by 256, this will draw weirdly scaled. Now, if you wanted to have it be a different size, so for example, this texture here is 800 by 600. If you wanted to draw it with that image size, you would say 800, 600. So you can add an extra 2 integers to provide that texture width and texture height. There is also, if we go in here, we should be able to see, there's actually a lot of different Blit methods, but I believe there is one with another integer. Yeah, I don't know what that one does. But then there's a few more. You probably won't need those ones because I've never used them. But yeah, so you can have that. But I'm going to leave these 2 integers out since our texture is 256 by 256. Now let's try and use this in practice. Let's show a little more and give it a actual example of where we use this. So I'm going to open our screen. This is the poop storage screen. And first of all, I'm actually going to move the integer that we drawn in the last episode. So I'm going to move that to about here, which is 107 by 12. So right here, 107 by 12. And there we go. That will now draw that at the right place. Fantastic. Now let's actually go ahead, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to draw this right here, and we're going to want to draw that into here based on the amount that is stored in here. So first of all, let's come back into Eclipse. Okay, no. First of all, we're going to want to find out the height of this area, right? So I know that the height is 62. So we're essentially going to want to map our number from 0 to 64 to 0 to 62. And that's a little complicated to do, but I'm going to show you two ways of doing it. So let's get the integer first. So final int scaled height is equal this dot menu, or we can just say count, is equal to count. And what we can do is divide that by 64, divide by 64f. You need to make sure it's a float because otherwise we'll have some rounding issues, and times that by 62. So that is the height, and cast that to an int, of course, and that will essentially get us the value from 0 to 64 to 0 to 62. Now, thankfully, someone on Discord called Basti has given me a fantastic method which calculates this for us. So I'm going to plonk this in here, and this just maps a number just like what we're trying to do here, but it uses a simple method to do it. So we're going to keep that integer cast since we're still going to need that, and we're going to say map number. Now what we're mapping is the count, and we're going to map that between the range min. So the range min, we're starting at 0. That's the lowest the count can be, and the highest the count can be is 64. And the result minimum, the minimum that it can convert to, is 0, and the maximum it can be is 62. So that's sort of the height. Now we can just draw it. So first of all, as we did before, we need to set the shader. I'm going to copy this from down here and plonk it in there. In fact, let's create a method to do this for us. Just a very simple method. So a public static void. We'll call this set texture. We'll actually call it bind texture. And we're just going to plonk that in there. And let's just call bind texture. And we'll put that down here as well. There we go. Now that we've binded the texture, we can blit. So we're going to call that blit method. And we're going to pass in the stack. Now we're going to want to get the left position. So we'll just for now put this dot left pos. Then we're going to want the top position. So we'll put this dot top pos for now. We'll change these all in a second. Then we're going to want the texture X and the texture height of where we're going to start. Texture X and texture Y. For now we'll put 0, 0. We'll change those in a second. And then we're going to want the width and height. So I'll put 0. And we know that the height is the amount, or the scaled height. Okay, let's go and modify these values. So we're going to want to find the position at the bottom. And as we can see, that is 118.74. So let's come back into Eclipse. Let's go plus 118. And for the top position, we're actually going to want to put 75. And the reason is because otherwise there's some weird sort of offsetting when translating between them. Obviously you can mess around with these values, maybe 74 would work for you, but I just found that 75 works and 74 didn't, for whatever reason. And from this sort of height that we're drawing it at, or the Y position, we're going to want to negative the amount, or I keep calling it the amount, I mean the scaled height. So the reason we're negativing the scaled height is because we want to draw it in a way, if we come back into paint.net, we essentially want to draw it so that it is drawing from the bottom and going up. So we can pass in that value and that will draw it in the correct way, basically. And then we need the texture X and the texture Y. Now, if we come into paint.net, this is of the actual texture that we're drawing, of course, which is this part down here. So the bottom left is 176 and 61. So let's go 176, 61. And I just figured out why that was 75, because I accidentally put 62 in here before, but that is 60. Oh no, that's right. 62. Is that not right? Hold up. I see. So right. So that's 62 high. But this bottom part here is 1, because this top Y is 0. I see. Right. So what we can actually do then, we can put 61, yeah. Then we're going to want the simple, well, we're actually going to want to negative the amount here. So we're actually going to want to do negative scaled height, so that it starts at the correct position. I'm just going to leave it as 62.75. I don't trust that I got that right. We can mess around with it when it's actually in game though. Yeah, and then we're going to want the actual width of what we're drawing. So if we come into here and check, and come over here, we're drawing to a 30 area. So it's 30 wide. Okay, fantastic. Now we're going to want to move this because this is, this is going to draw in front of the font. We don't want that. So let's remove that. And we're going to want to draw it before all of the font drawing. And we can just move this count variable to there. Great, great. And I'm actually going to move this left a little bit, so we'll go, we'll go 105. Okay. Let's now try and run the game, and we'll see what is up and if it works. Here we are in the game. Let's open our GI. Here we are, we have our number 0. If we put in 1, you can see it doesn't draw anything because at that scale it rounds down to 0 essentially. And if you put 1 in, you can see it starts to draw some, and it will go up and up and up and up. As you can see, the number is increasing at the same time, and as we put more in, you can see it fills up. Fantastic. And obviously that stays when we close and reopen the GUI. It also stays when we close and reopen the game, of course. I mean, why wouldn't it? Wouldn't really make any sense if it didn't. We can just double check anyways, just to double make sure that it's not going to act all weird on us. Here we are. That is fine. So yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's it. What can I say? What can I say? So yeah, I hope you guys did find this tutorial useful. I know it was a very short one, a very basic one, but I just wanted to try and explain that concept a little bit, since I really did brush over it in the screen tutorial. I wish I didn't brush over it so much. Yeah, so I hope you guys did find this tutorial useful. If you did, please do be sure to smash your face into that like button and poop on it as well, because poop, and subscribe. If you really enjoyed or really found it useful, please do be sure to share it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Goodbye.
بابا جي بابا جي بابا جي لإكس بوكس سيريس إكس بابا جي بابا جي لبلا ستيشن 5 بلا ستيشن 5 بلا ستيشن 5 إلى لوجيتك لوجيتك إلى هايبر إكس 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 هايبر إكس 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 هايبر إكس 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 إلى جراند فدور ديني جراند فدور ديني